All right, let's just jump right into this. I want you to picture something for a second. Imagine you're standing on a hill, and you're watching a massive, invincible, 200-year-old global superpower, an empire that literally stretched all the way from the Indus Valley to the Aegean Sea, just completely vanish before your very eyes. Today in this explainer, we're diving into the breathtaking, cascading collapse of the Achaemenid Empire under its final ruler, Darius III. Because this isn't just a history lesson, it's a wild story of monumental battles, heartbreaking betrayals, and honestly, the sheer fragility of ultimate power.
Before the Macedonians were even on the radar as a real, existential threat, a Greek mercenary commander named Xerxes actually warned Darius III about Alexander the Great's tactical genius. He straight up told the king that the vast Persian army was essentially just a bunch of extras compared to the battle-hardened Macedonians. And what was Darius's response? Well, he executed Xerxes on the spot purely out of pride. Right before he died, Xerxes uttered those chilling final words you're looking at, which ended up becoming one of the most eerily accurate, tragic prophecies in history.
So let's look at how this started. Chapter 1. A blood-stained throne.
To really understand this epic collapse, we have to look inside first. The truth is, the Achaemenid Empire was crumbling from the inside out, long before Alexander ever crossed into Asia. The empire was structurally sick. You had crippling taxation. We're talking about provinces being drained of the equivalent of $180 million each, which was then just melted down into bullion and locked away in central treasuries. This caused severe local recessions. And even though the empire was incredibly vast, there was absolutely no shared national or linguistic identity to bind anyone together during a crisis. Plus, their military strength had totally degraded. They were relying way too heavily on Greek mercenaries instead of training their own native troops.
And the rot went all the way to the top. The imperial court had basically descended into total, lethal chaos. There was this powerful court eunuch named Bagos, who literally poisoned King Artaxerxes III, and then, if that wasn't enough, orchestrated the death of his successor, Artaxerxes IV. It was an unprecedented, bloody game of musical chairs that ultimately shoved Darius III onto a very unstable throne. So when Alexander finally arrived, he wasn't kicking down a sturdy door, right? He was pushing against a rotting frame.
Which brings us to Chapter 2. The disaster at Issus.
The Battle of Issus is honestly a masterclass in why sheer numbers just aren't everything. Darius brought a colossal army to this fight. It was so huge that it completely blinded him with overconfidence. But he made a massive, fatal strategic error. He let the battle take place in a narrow coastal plain squeezed right between the mountains and the sea. This completely neutralized his massive numerical advantage. Alexander, on the other hand, was highly tactical and just insanely aggressive. He played the terrain perfectly, basically turning Darius's unwieldy troop numbers into a trapped, chaotic liability.
And here is where it all falls apart. As Alexander's forces brutally carved their way right through the Persian lines, Darius panicked. Seeing the absolute terrifying ferocity of the Macedonians coming right at him, Darius III became the very first person to turn his chariot around and flee the battlefield. Imagine being a soldier seeing that. The psychological impact was devastating. Watching their king literally abandon them instantly shattered Persian morale. The army collapsed entirely, and in the sheer chaos of running away, Darius actually left his own family behind, which led to the capture of his wife Staeira.
Chapter 3. The Fall at Gaugamela. So Darius knew he desperately needed a decisive rematch, and this time he chose a vast, wide-open plain near Erbil. Why? Because he had a terrifying new weapon he wanted to unleash, and he needed space for it. The Scythe Chariots. Just picture this in your head. Heavy war chariots roaring across the dusty plains, equipped with long, razor-sharp blades sticking straight out of their wheels. They were literally designed to mow down and slice right through the Macedonian infantry ranks. It sounds like something out of a movie. Darius actually spent days perfectly leveling the terrain out there just to prepare for this cinematic, brutal charge.
Now, seeing this ridiculously vast Persian host waiting for them, Alexander's top general, Parmenion, actually told him, hey, we should probably launch a night attack to offset the sheer terror of their numbers. But Alexander, he firmly refused. He famously declared, I will not steal my victory. He insisted on a direct, daylight confrontation. He didn't just want to win. He wanted to break the Persian spirit permanently, out in the open, for the whole world to see.
And incredibly, tragically, history repeats itself. Despite the terrifying scythed chariots and an overwhelming numerical advantage, the Macedonian phalanx and cavalry proved absolutely unstoppable. We're talking absolute fever-pitch hand-to-hand combat here. And right when the Macedonian wedge pierced the Persian line and headed directly toward the king, Darius broke again. He fled the battlefield a second time.
And honestly, this single act essentially handed the keys of the entire Achaemenid Empire right over to the Macedonians. The imperial army just disintegrated.
Chapter 4. Heroes of the Persian Gates.
But here's the thing. While the king was busy running away, the actual spirit of the empire wasn't going to die without a fight. As Alexander marched relentlessly toward the capital of Persepolis, he slammed into an incredible wall of resistance. Meet Commander Ariobarzanes and his sister, Utab. They were absolutely not going to let their homeland fall quietly. They represent the breathtaking final defiance of the empire's greatest defenders.
Ariobarzanes managed to gather about 20,000 Persian troops, and he fortified this narrow, treacherous mountain pass known as the Persian Gates. It was the only direct route to the capital. When Alexander's forces confidently marched into that pass, the Persians basically unleashed hell. Boulders, arrows, and spears just rained down on them from the cliffs above. For the very first time, Alexander's unstoppable tide hit a colossal, bloody roadblock.
But then, an absolutely heartbreaking betrayal happens. In a tragedy that heavily mirrors the famous Greek stand at Thermopylae, a local shepherd, tempted by a massive reward, guided Alexander's troops through a secret mountain path right under the cover of darkness. This brought the Macedonians directly behind the Persian lines.
Surrounded and completely cut off, you'd think they would give up, right? But Ariobarzanes, his sister Utab, and their forces did not surrender. They fought with this epic, unbelievable bravery. They fought until the bitter, bitter end, giving literally every last drop of blood for their homeland, ultimately falling together right there in the mountain pass. It is such a deeply moving testament to their loyalty, and it is a massive contrast to their fleeing king.
Chapter 5. Persepolis in Flames.
With the Persian gates broken, the path straight to the heart of the empire was wide open, and the speed of the collapse is just breathtaking. Watch this domino effect. Babylon, once the absolute jewel of the ancient world, surrenders without a fight. Susa just opens its gates. Persepolis is captured and its immense treasury is totally looted. And finally, Ecbatana falls as Darius just continues to run eastward. The entire administrative backbone of a 200-year-old state literally snapped in a matter of months.
And then came the ultimate symbol of the empire's destruction. In Persepolis, during this incredibly opulent celebration, Alexander ordered the grand palaces to be set on fire. The story goes that he was urged on by one of his mistresses who wanted revenge for the Persians burning Athens decades prior. These magnificent structures were built with immense cedar beams. Imagine this, as the flames consumed the absolute heart of Persian culture, the heavy scent of burning cedar filled the night air. It marked the literal turning to ashes of the entire Achaemenid legacy.
Chapter 6. Death of the Last King.
Meanwhile, Darius III is still out there on the run, trying desperately to raise a new army in the eastern provinces. But by this point, his generals had lost absolutely all faith in him. In a final, incredibly tragic betrayal, Darius was arrested and assassinated, and not by Alexander, by his own relative, Bessus, the satrap of Bactria. The last king of kings didn't die in a blaze of glory. He died bleeding out in a wagon in the remote mountains, a victim of treachery from his own inner circle.
When Alexander finally caught up and found the fallen king, it's a really poignant moment. The story goes that he actually took off his own cloak and draped it over Darius's body. Alexander, wanting to legitimize his new rule, and maybe actually feeling a weird sense of respect for his ultimate rival, ordered that Darius be taken all the way back to the ruined city of Persepolis. There, the last Achaemenid king was given a respectful, royal burial right amidst the very ashes of his former empire.
Which leaves us with this final, lingering thought to take away from all of this. How does the greatest empire the world had ever seen turn into dust and myth in just a few short years? It's a pretty stark reminder that no matter how vast your territory is, and no matter how endless your wealth might seem, a fractured foundation and a catastrophic failure of leadership can bring even the mightiest superpowers crashing down. Thank you so much for joining me in this explainer. Keep questioning history, and I'll see you next time.